Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 27th, 2015 meeting of the Economic Development and Housing Advisory Commission. Tonight's agenda is available on the counter, along with the request to speak cards. A reminder to everyone that request to speak cards should be completed and turned in to the clerk prior to completion of any staff presentation. For those speakers wishing to speak on items not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of this commission, please write the item number on your card. All speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and televised so that all speakers, in order to be recognized, must be called on by the chair and come forward to the microphone. Speaking in public may cause some individuals to be uncomfortable, so everyone is asked to be professional and respectful at all times. We will have the Pledge of Allegiance, and Commissioner Bragg, would you lead us? Okay, first item on the agenda is maybe an introduction to staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Brady. I was actually going to wait until I was doing my formal presentation, but we can go ahead and introduce everyone now. So to my left is our city clerk, Chris Rankin. She may not be at these meetings every time, but she's the professional at this. So for the swearing in and all the other business, she's going to handle that tonight.
Okay.
I'm Aaron Laurel. I'm the Economic Development Manager. To my right is Louise Collis. She's the Interim Housing Manager. Louise is actually in the Community Development Department. Economic Development, as you'll hear later, is in the City Manager's office. So it's actually two different departments that are represented at staff level for this commission. And you'll hear both issues related to economic development and housing, of course. And then in the audience, I'll start with our Port Business Manager, Rick Toft. In the back is our Community Investment Manager, Katie Jacobson, and Senior Program Manager, Katie Yancey. They are all in the the City Manager's office, the Economic Development Division. And then lastly, Raul Huerta is a Senior Program Manager. He's in Community Development in the Housing Division. There is one staff person who's missing tonight. That's Diane Richards. She's a Senior Program Manager as well. She's sick, so you'll see her at all the meetings going forward.
Okay, very good.
And I do just want to start off by saying we really appreciate your time and your willingness to volunteer for this commission. It's really important for our public process to have engaged commissioners, so we look forward to seeing you every other month.
Thank you, Aaron. Our next item on the agenda is the swearing in of the members.
Yes, thank you, Commissioners. If you'd all rise and raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Michael Brady,
Do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and to the Constitution of the State of California, that I will take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties on which I am about to enter. Thank you very much. You all have oaths at your place. If you wouldn't mind signing those oaths, passing them to me.
Okay. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the selection of the chair and vice chair. So do we do the chair first or the vice chair first? Chair first, okay. So nominations are open for the position of chair of this commission.
I nominate Michael.
Okay. Any other nominations? There's a second. Are there any other nominations? Okay. All those in favor? Say.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Opposed? Oh, looks like I'm chair. Thank you. Okay, continuing. Vice chair position. Nominations are open for vice chair. To follow up when the chair's not here. Okay. I will nominate Ming Lee.
I will second that.
Okay. So we have a nomination and a second. Are there any other nominations? Okay. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so Min Lee, you are the vice chair. Okay, next. Presentations by public on matters not on the agenda. Do we have any of those? No, okay. And then we want to approve the minutes from the February 25th, 2015 Economic Development Advisory Commission regular meeting. Do I have a nomination or a recommend, what should I say? A
Motion.
motion, thank you. A motion to approve the minutes. Motion approved. Okay, a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the meetings are approved as presented. Okay, regular agenda, presentation Economic Development Division and 2015-2017 work plan by Mr. Laurel.
Thank you, Chairman Brady. I prefer presenting from the podium, if you don't mind, so it's a little too short over there. So,
Excuse me a moment, just a moment.
Sure.
Can we turn the air down a bit? It's really breezy in here. It's hard to hear.
yeah, we were just talking about
I
that.
actually
so.
have tried to do that. I'm hoping that it's going to come down anytime.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so as we started off with on staff introductions, you understand now that we have two departments represented here. So as an orientation tonight, we just wanted to give you a flavor of what to expect, to let you know who we are, what we do, and what we have going on for the next couple of years. Louise is going to do a similar presentation later on the housing side, so I wanted to start with an overview of our economic development program. So the division, as it's currently constituted, was formed in 2013. Obviously, West Sacramento has a long history doing economic development. Ever since we incorporated, we had a very robust redevelopment program. When that went away, the functions of economic development were sort of split into two different departments. When our new city manager came in 2013, he moved some of the staff into the city manager's office, which is fairly common in a lot of cities to house economic development in the city manager's office. But then in 2015, most recently, we went through another reorganization and we expanded the department to its current staff level. So our scope, I think the best way to describe it is economic development can mean many things. In West Sacramento, it does mean a lot. But really what we do is try to prep the ground here for private investment. We do that through doing projects and different economic development initiatives. Our city happens to own quite a bit of real estate between the port and the city, almost 500 acres. So we also try to take actions to position those real estate assets for private development. We also work with the city's discretionary funding for both infrastructure and some strategic planning initiatives. So as you'll hear me describe later, we manage the funds involved in that. And then the other very unique thing about our city is we have the port. The port was taken over by the city in 2006. The port itself has been in different departments, but under its current business model, it's in the city manager's office, and so we also administer the port district. As I mentioned earlier, we have 5 staff members in the division. the manager, and then there's a community investment manager, port business manager, 2 senior program managers. And the thing with that is we're all senior management. It's a little unique that we are the way we're organized is not, so hierarchical. It's really, we're project managers, and we're all, I think I'd put us up against, no offense at all to Sacramento, but I put us up against any city staff in both the region, really the state. I have a chance being involved in a statewide organization dealing with economic development to see what goes on in other cities. And I think with the scope of what we have to work with here, the staff that we have, we're really well positioned, and also our leadership, our council clearly supports what we do, and also the citizens do as well. So I think, it's a great place to be. It's a great place to be as commissioners to work on these topics. So, but our staff has over 50 years of combined experience just at the city alone. We've all been here upwards of 10 years or longer. So I think that's a real asset. And then, of course, our funding, which is really the most important thing for what we do. We have a very unique funding source called the Community Investment Fund. I'm going to explain where that came from and what it does. So when redevelopment was eliminated here, we used to have $24 million a year going towards redevelopment. Just to put that in perspective, our entire general fund is right around $40 million. So a lot of property tax dollars were going towards the redevelopment agency for all the projects that you all know around town, and all the great things that happened over the last 25 years along the riverfront were mainly a result of that. When it was eliminated by the state, it was a big deal here. So instead of just kind of trying to sort through things and rely on the state to help us figure it out, our mayor and the city council were really proactive. They formed a committee. They assigned staff the task of coming up with really a new paradigm for doing the old work of redevelopment. And what we came up with was the attachment to your report, the Community Investment Action Plan. It put forth a whole set of recommendations on restoring the functions that redevelopment had, but also, more importantly, the funding. The way we did that, we established a Community Investment Fund in 2012. And what it did was directed all the money that the city got back from redevelopment, and I'll go into a little detail on that in a minute, towards this fund. And that fund is used for both administration, projects, and economic development initiatives, really to keep that work going. We took it a step further. In 2012, the City Council placed a ballot measure during the general election. You may recall Measure G. And it basically asked voters, should all the money that we get back from redevelopment be used for what we call community investment projects, really infrastructure projects, strategic initiatives, and that passed by 87%. So as I mentioned, the community support here is really profound, and I think it really gives us a great platform to do our work. So the Community Investment Fund now generates about $3.5 million a year. We started with $24 million, and this is what this chart is meant to illustrate. I'll explain it the best I can. When redevelopment was eliminated, the money, the reason they did it was all that money came from the school district, the county, the city, all the other taxing entities that were part of the redevelopment district. So when it was eliminated, that money got divvied up. First, it pays for any statutory pass-through payments that existed before, like the school district got some money before. The state and county get an admin fee for the wind down. And then all the rest of the money gets put into what we call the Redevelopment Obligation Retirement Fund. That's all the remaining property tax. And then the agency had some legal obligations to pay down, like debt service and other things. So that gets brought off of that total. And then what's left over gets distributed to all the remaining taxing agencies. The city being one of those, we get about 50% of it here, which is really high. And so the result of that $24 million becomes $3.5 million going to the city, and that's what goes into the Community Investment Fund. So I can explain more later how that all works, but the bottom line is we get about $3.5 million a year. There is some growth potential for that as well as new projects come on board. So since 2013, really in the aftermath of redevelopment, after the Community Investment Fund was set up, and we started doing the work under this new paradigm, we have made quite a bit of progress. The first big item is what you'll hear me talk about a lot and a little bit tonight is infrastructure financing districts. What that is, it's a new form of doing financing, taking property tax increase revenue. So not a new tax, but as property tax goes up, you can pledge that money towards infrastructure and actually bond against it. With redevelopment, we had that ability. When it went away, all California cities lost that ability. So it's a big deal. We spent a lot of time on legislation to get it established, and we have our first one. Really, it's one of the first in the state. It covers the Bridge District. We formed that last year. So Measure G, like I said, we have $3.5 million a year coming to that fund. We've allocated over $5 million so far to those projects that you see listed there. The most notable one is probably the McGowan Bridge. It's the one we can all drive over today and appreciate, especially if you live in Southport. And so the Measure G allocations are really meant to be placed in strategic infrastructure projects that will catalyze additional development, mainly in the riverfront area. The port business plan was a major accomplishment. When the port, before the business plan was done and the new model was implemented, the port was nearly bankrupt. I mean, that was the honest state of affairs with the port. I credit a lot to Rick Toft and the work he's done to implement that business plan. I can proudly say today the port is actually under an operating surplus for the first time maybe in 15 years. So that's been a major accomplishment for the city. And then the Pioneer Bluff Transition Plan, that's the area that is just south of the Bridge District along the river. It's right now an active industrial area. We're trying to transition that to more of a mixed-use environment. It's going to take a long time, but the transition plan, which you'll have a presentation on it at a future meeting, is really meant to be the framework for starting that process. We have really taken hold of this reputation as being a global food hub in West Sacramento. We've done a lot of work recruiting international companies that are food related, but just by our nature being an agricultural area and being a major distribution center for the region, we sort of have that already on the ground. But just in the last couple of years, we recruited successfully 4 different businesses that came from other places, a couple of them from Japan, to locate new facilities here. And then also a couple other major accomplishments. Grant applications is a lot of what between our 2 departments, we do a lot of that work here. So just in the last couple of years, we've secured almost $5 million in grants for the projects listed there. And lastly, when I said economic development can mean many things, one of the things that we do in economic development is the urban farming initiative. It's really picking up a lot of steam thanks to the nonprofit Center for Land-Based Learning. They're going around setting up these farms, but the first one was opened on a city property at the corner of 5th and C, and that's been a major success for the city and that neighborhood. So now I wanted to get into a summary of our work plan. So as a division, we report directly to the city manager. We want to make sure we're on task and we're in sync with the council's strategic plan, which I think you all got a highlight of during the mayor's orientation. So you should be familiar with the council's strategic plan process. A lot of what we do is right on that plan. We're just implementing the council's priorities. So a lot of our work plan, you'll notice, ties back to the strategic plan. The first one is forming a citywide IFD. So as I mentioned, we formed one in the Bridge District. The real purpose of that is to be able to take property tax that comes in, a new property tax, not a new tax on property owners, but just the increase, and pledge that to infrastructure projects. We have a long slate of major projects. If you add up streetcar, 2 new bridges, more improvements along the riverfront, flood protection. We sort of define infrastructure in West Sacramento, I think. So the enhanced IFD is a new tool that was enacted by legislation last year. It took the old IFD code and added a bunch of new bells and whistles. And so we're now taking that code. Katie Jacobson is our lead staff on that project, and we're in the process of forming one that will be citywide and really be the future of our city in funding infrastructure improvements. And really these 3 items listed here, I see them as sort of the foundational items for our economic development program. The EIFD is our main long-term funding source. The last item there, the Community Investment Fund, is sort of our short-term. We operate under a 5-year cash flow model, and we pledge expenditures to different projects that are priorities right now, whereas the EIFD is sort of our long-term, we think 20 years ahead on that one. And then the one in the middle, the real estate strategy, as I mentioned, we own almost 500 acres of property, and we don't want to just be a land baron. We're trying to actually make things happen with those properties, both at the port and in areas just like our downtown here. And so we're in the process of coming up with a strategy to look at the advantages of having the port and the real estate powers it has, look at what the city can do and what the EIFD authority is, and coming up with a way, the best way we can come up with to almost act as a master developer as a city. We don't want the city necessarily, the legal entity of the city being that developer necessarily, so we're looking at maybe forming a JPA. So this is all, we're kind of making it up as we go along based on the advantages we have here. But Katie Yancey is the lead on that project, and you'll definitely be hearing more about it going forward. Oops. Really quick on the Community Investment Fund, this is the list of projects that have funding allocations in that 5-year model. It's almost $10 million that is being leveraged by almost $20 million or more, depending on if you count the bridge money in grant funds. So I'll point out on a map here where these projects are, just to give you a sense, but really the focus is on the river, the riverfront. It's really our best asset in town. It's where most of the private investment has already happened, where we see it going. Also, it's where a lot of the other infrastructure projects that are going to mean a lot to the city are happening, like streetcar. But the Grand Gateway project is just down the street here. We own about 9 contiguous acres. If you notice, there's a motel that we just demolished. We actually own that, and that property joins with 8 other acres. So we have a nice site there. We're working on an infrastructure project and implementing a planning document to prep that site for development. We'll end up issuing probably a request for proposals to developers, but we're a little bit away. We want to prep the site, add value to it, and then get it ready for development. So that's one project you'll hear more about. Katie Yancey's our project manager on that one. We have a couple of bridge projects. The I Street Bridge replacement is taking the old I Street Bridge, eliminating vehicular traffic and adding a new bridge just to the north. Broadway Bridge is a little bit more out there. We're working with the city of Sacramento on a planning effort right now to get that project ready for federal funding. And then a couple other big area-wide efforts. The Pioneer Bluff area I mentioned is a transitional area. We're trying to move it from industrial to mixed-use development. So there's kind of a dual-track process there. We have sort of the ground level deindustrialization activities. Rick Poft is our lead on that side of things. And then on the planning side, Katie Yancey is implementing a grant that we received from the state to do what we're calling a redevelopment master plan for the Pioneer Bluff area and the Stone Lock area to the south. So that's highlighted in the orange there. That's a long-term effort, obviously, but we're taking the lessons that we learned in the Bridge District and the accomplishments we were able to get done there and applying that to what we're doing in Pioneer Bluff. And then the Washington area, just to the north, it's the area shaded in the green. Katie Jacobson and Katie Yancey over the last 2 years have spent almost their whole waking hours doing this plan to update the specific plan for that area, get it ready for infrastructure investment, and now we're in the implementation phase. And so that area is really ripe for development. A lot of it has already happened over the last 10 years, and we're going to be focusing a lot of infrastructure investment in that area. So I mentioned Pioneer Bluff and Washington, major items on our work plan. Also, they're both on the council strategic agenda. And then a couple of projects that are pretty exciting because we don't get to do a lot of actual projects coming out of the recession. It's sort of starting again. But we own 2 buildings in the Washington area. The firehouse at the corner of 3rd and C, and what we're calling now the 5th and C garage at the corner of 5th and C. The firehouse, we have a development agreement with local developer DNS Development. You may know some of their projects in Sacramento. They're a pretty major infill developer. They're doing an adaptive reuse project on the firehouse that will essentially gut the building, really keep the historic look and integrity of the building, but bring in new infrastructure, new amenities to the inside and make it ready for a restaurant. The 5th and C garage, Katie Jacobson is working on a request for interest for potential developers to look at that building and give us their ideas for what they'd want to do with it. It's a little, maybe less attractive than the firehouse because it doesn't have some of the features of the firehouse with parking and just sort of the historic aspect of it. But we think it's a unique building that there's a lot of new types of retail and food-related uses that could make a lot of sense there. So we're going to see what the market tells us through that process. The firehouse is actually being managed by Diane Richards, who I mentioned is out sick. And then you can see Grand Gateway, that's on the bottom left. That's kind of the preliminary plan for that area, and Katie Yancey's our project manager there. So that highlights the major items on the work plan. In your staff report, I gave you more of a comprehensive list. And if you have any questions about that or anything else related to our division, I'm happy to take those. So
Thank you for the comprehensive presentation. Appreciate it. Commissioners, any questions?
Yeah. So it's the Ice Street Bridge project?
Your microphone has a little button there. Yeah.
It's the site button.
It's actually at the base of the microphone.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. So the Ice Street Bridge is going to be a complete, you're going to gut the old bridge, the plan for the Ice Street Bridge. Can you?
No, it's actually a new bridge. So that's why we call it the I Street Replacement Bridge. It's
Oh,
actually
okay.
not aligning with I Street. It's actually going to be further north. So on our side, it will align with C Street. On the Sacramento side, it'll align with Rail Yards Boulevard. So imagine a new bridge coming across. It'll land in the same spot, but the current approach will be taken down. And the future of the actual current I Street Bridge is a little uncertain. One plan that's been floated out there is to actually turn it into a bicycle pedestrian sort of park-like environment. The only issue there is that Union Pacific is the owner of the bridge, so we're working out the details on that. But it's a new bridge, just to the north of the current one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith, any questions?
No question.
No further questions? Very good.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Laurel. Okay, next on the agenda is presentation regarding the City of West Sacramento Affordable Housing Policies and Program by Ms. Collins.
Good evening. As Aaron said earlier, my name's Louise Collis. I'm the interim housing manager in the Community Development Department. Been here with the city for 11 years in several different departments. There's been a lot of restructuring, especially over the last few years. Aaron and I have been in the same department along with the rest of the staff that was here this evening. And along with me is Raul Huerta. He is a senior program manager in the housing division. And I'm just going to give you a quick overview of our affordable housing programs. That's our primary mission in the housing division, although we do work on some other things, primarily grant writing and grant management. And as you'll see in a little bit, we do operate a micro-enterprise technical assistance program. Over the past year, I think we've written a little over $6 million in grants. The largest by far, we're still waiting to see if that one was funded. And that will work on the Grand Gateway project. And actually, we can't take total credit for that. That was definitely a team effort between economic development staff and housing staff, was to do a bunch of improvements in the Grand Gateway area. So we have a number of housing policies that the city has developed over the years. As those policies are modified or updated, those are things that might be coming before this commission. The first is our inclusionary housing ordinance. And this is an ordinance that requires developers of new housing to provide at least 15% affordable units, or there are some options where they could pay an in lieu fee to the city for our housing trust fund that we use then when we go after all these big grants that we try and get. You usually need some kind of local matching funds to be competitive in a grant application, and that's one of our, with the loss of redevelopment, that's probably our primary source of local match for housing related grants. There is a housing element section to the city's general plan, and it has about 30 different activities in it that the city follows to encourage decent, safe, and affordable housing and energy efficiency in housing, a number of different areas that are covered under the housing element. The current one was adopted in 2013, and it's an 8-year plan, so that one goes through 2021. Yolo County has a homeless plan, and we are a partner in that plan. There's a homeless committee that is at the county level, and then the city has a council person on that committee, and so we try and work on homeless issues on a regional level because homelessness doesn't have a lot of hard, fast boundaries. People move around a lot. A lot of our services are in Woodland. The city also developed a short-term action plan last year, and we're just about done with it, to do some immediate changes within the city. But the long-term plan is on a countywide basis. Sometimes we participate in those programs. And another policy is fair housing. If there are fair housing issues, this housing division is the first point of contact for trying to resolve those. We're not attorneys, we can't give legal advice, but we often act as a referral agency and at least make sure people know what is available. And actually, we just got some grant funds to provide more fair housing education and counseling in West Sacramento. First, I'd like to go over our affordable home ownership programs. As I mentioned, we have an inclusionary housing program that provides a lot of affordable home ownership units, primarily for low-income or moderate-income home buyers. We also have a first-time homebuyer assistance program that provides down payment assistance of up to $50,000 or 35% of the home purchase price, whichever is less. We haven't been operating that program for a while because we've been out of money, but we just got a new grant, so we're gearing back up to get underway. And I think the money's going to go pretty fast. We have $500,000. We're waiting on that grant contract, and we have, how many do we have for roll on the waiting list? Like close to 70 people on our waiting list. So there's a lot of interest right now in our first-time homebuyer program. That $500,000 is probably going to go this summer. I might by the fall, I would guess. A program that we're wrapping up and Raul has taken the lead on is our neighborhood stabilization program. During the housing crisis, we had a huge foreclosure problem in West Sacramento. We were a heavily impacted city, and in particular neighborhoods, the results were devastating. Many homes that had been well-kept home ownership units ended up vacant for some of them for years. They were trashed, they were tagged, they were torn up. Some of them were bank-owned, some of them turned into rentals. We had 2 grants over that time frame that we got from the state that allowed us to lend money to nonprofits to purchase those homes, rehab them. Most of them became home ownership units. I think we had 5 or 6 that we turned over to a nonprofit to provide permanent supportive housing for formerly homeless families. But the vast majority of them became home ownership units again. We usually went after the worst looking house on the street, and we tried to turn it into the best looking house on the street. We do have a single-family housing rehab program. Right now, we don't have any funding for that. That one's not been operational for a couple of years, well, quite a while. During the economic downturn, no one had equity, and it's a loan program, so we couldn't get the money out. In the future, that might come back, but at this point in time, it's still really not a feasible program. And then we have several other programs that are kind of legacy programs from the past where we have done home ownership units. Oh, and by the way, we are looking for a volunteer to participate on our first-time homebuyer loan committee. So if you know of someone who is available sometimes during the day, we can usually give you at least a week's notice for about an hour. We have a loan committee that reviews all the loans and makes recommendations for approval or disapproval. So that would be very, very helpful. You can contact me or contact Raul. We need to get someone so we can get up and running. I mentioned before that we had that neighborhood stabilization program where we went after the worst looking house on the street and tried to turn it into the best. This is one of our early examples. Let's see, this is on Manzanita, right, Raul, I think? Yeah, I think that's on Manzanita. Those two are the same house, before and after. I know it's kind of hard to tell. By pitching the roof, by putting an attractive overhang and porch, by putting in some attractive landscaping, that made a huge difference in that neighborhood. We actually had neighbors that came and told us, "We are so glad that you did this. This has really made a big difference in our street." Here's another one. The little white house on the top became that pretty little yellow house on the bottom. Doesn't look like the same house, but I promise you it was. Upper left-hand corner, you can see what one of the kitchens looked like once upon a time before, and then the lower shot is that very same kitchen after the rehab. So these homes were, really nice, nicely rehabbed. We made sure that all the appliances and all the systems were new and in very good working order. So when low-income families bought them, they wouldn't have a lot of, at least initially for the first 5 or 10 years, we don't expect them to have a lot of extra costs on repairs and things. And you can see one of the living rooms there where they redid the fireplace. And we put in a lot of ceiling fans and energy efficient windows, as much energy efficiency upgrades as we could to help keep the PG&E bills down on these properties. When I talk about low income, I'm talking about the HUD income limits that we get from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and ours are funneled through the state. But as you can see, a low income 4-person household, we're talking about a household at $59,000 or below. The only program we have for housing for moderate income people is our inclusionary program, so we do have some moderate income homes affordable to some of the higher income brackets there. Here's some example of the people that we serve. Very low income would be, for example, the median Yolo County wage for a preschool teacher. Low income would be the median Yolo County wage for an HR assistant. And moderate income is the median Yolo County wage for an auto mechanic. These are the kinds of families that we're primarily working with most of our affordable housing programs and a lot of our rental units as well. Here, this is not necessarily an inclusionary unit, but it's an example of some of the units that we have sold as inclusionary to be affordable either at low income or moderate income. This one was in Lindenwood at Southport. We've had some units at Ironworks that we currently, since they're building again, we actually have a few new ones going on. Our inclusionary program died when no one was developing. They weren't building units, so we didn't have any inclusionary units being produced. But it's slowly starting to return. So affordable rental housing, the city works in a number of different ways. Our primary goal, though, is to act as a lender. So we provide financial assistance, gap financing usually, to developers of affordable housing. We do get a little bit into the development, sometimes, especially if the city owns a property. So we might put out an RFP and select a developer to produce what we're interested in. But a lot of times, most of the time, we're not the developer, we are the lender. Right now, we have over 1,600 units in West Sacramento that are affordable, that the city has regulatory agreements on, which means long-term affordability. Most of those agreements are 55 years covenants. Over 300 of those are strictly for seniors. As I mentioned, we do have some transitional housing, that's for people transitioning out of homelessness, and a few units that are permanent supportive housing for homeless families. Project sizes varies. We've got some single units and single family units all the way up to a 296 unit project. Average is probably 60 or 70 unit projects. And a number of these units, 192, are located in market rate projects where a developer built an affordable housing or a market rate rental project and built their inclusionary units in there. So they don't look any different. They aren't treated any differently than a market rate project. You just have to be income verified to move in, and your rent is adjusted accordingly. There's some at Capitol Place and Metro Place, Monticello, and the Savannah. Here's one of our affordable projects. This one's 100% affordable, the Rivers Seniors Apartments on the north side of town up in the Rivers development. And an older project that was rehabbed a number of years ago, Bright Gardens. The city assisted with that rehab. Quite a few years ago, actually. I think it was probably before my time. Margaret McDowell Manor is a senior project. That's, if you ever go to the post office, you drive right by that one. Parkside is on West Capitol Avenue. It's one of the newer projects. I think it opened in 2010, I believe. And it's on West Capitol Avenue, just a little ways down the street. As I mentioned, Monticello that's on Jefferson. You've probably seen it if you're heading down towards Southport. Has some affordable units in it. We've also, in addition to developing new projects, we've also done some rehab projects. Courtyard Village was at the corner of Evergreen and Evergreen and Pine, I think. It was known as Harbor Park back then. These are photographs from before the new acquisition by a new owner and rehab with assistance from the city. And I could have probably about 100 photographs like this, honestly. I just chose a few. It was in pretty rough shape. After the rehab, this is Courtyard Village afterwards, inside and out. These are some of the amenities that the residents have. They have a library, meeting areas, exercise room, recreation areas. So we in West Sacramento, we try and approach affordable housing in a number of different ways. Home ownership, rental, moderate income, low income, very low income. And one of the goals of the City Council is to achieve a vision of quality housing choice for everybody in West Sacramento. So that's primarily what our division does, is try and work towards that. Do you have any questions?
Ms. Collis, thank you for that comprehensive and impressive, enlightening presentation of what's going on around our community. Any questions?
Very nice job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, I think you're up next,
I'm afraid I am.
and that's for the consideration of guidelines for the Community Development Block Grant, the CDBG, Micro Enterprise Technical Assistance, Support Services, and Financial Assistance Program.
As I mentioned before, we do some grant writing and grants management in housing, and we primarily oversee the city's Community Development Block Grant Program, that's CDBG. CDBG are HUD funds that, because we're a small city, we don't get them directly from HUD. We have to go through the state program, so they're funneled through the state. One day when we grow up and become a big city, we may get our funds directly from HUD. We're hoping that'll happen soon. Usually you have to hit about 50,000 in population for that to happen, and we're there. We're just waiting for HUD to notice, I think. There's a process that we have to go through. But in the meantime, we do really well with the state program. We're very we're very competitive in the state program, so we do pretty well as far as getting funding. The grant we wrote last year included funding for our microenterprise program that we've had for several years. Excuse me. And so CDBG has a very, very narrow definition of a microenterprise. It's a business with a business owner, and he has a business with no more than 5 paid employees. So if the business owner is one of those employees, he counts as one. It's very tiny startups and very little mom and pop type shop businesses. To be qualified for CDBG assistance as a microenterprise, the business owner also has to be under our low income limits, his household. So what we have been doing in the past is what they call technical assistance. We have done workshops that our consultant devised specifically for West Sacramento. So there's 5 or 6 workshops that are series. People learn about business theory, basic business theory, financial reports, why you need them, what they mean, what to look for in a financial report. It's not just something that your accountant hands you and stick in a file. How is that useful for a business owner, and how to develop a business plan so that you can plan for the future, for the health of a long-term health of your business. And then once they go through the classes, they are eligible to receive one-on-one counseling. So then they can sit down with one of the business counselors, talk about their personal finances, their business finances, kind of confidential information that's really not appropriate for the classroom setting. And we've had a number of businesses open. Most of the people that have attended already own a business. They've already started it, but what we did is help them make it stronger. And our best attended classes have been our Spanish language classes. Those have been very popular. We fill every one of those. But we also have a lot of Russian-speaking immigrants in West Sacramento. Not enough. We've never had enough to do an entire class, but we have had, I think, 5 or 6 that have just gone in for one-on-one counseling because the consultant we were using had a Russian-speaking counselor. So that's been really, really successful program. So the state also allows, in addition to just doing the technical assistance, the state also allows us to provide limited types of support services if they're needed to help the business be stronger. So and it's very limited, but if someone needs to pay for, let's say, for example, child care while they go through a class to learn QuickBooks, or if someone needs to have an hour or 2 of consultation with an attorney because they're trying to decide what kind of business structure is best for them, or with an accountant about tax structures. Those are the kinds of things on a limited basis we can do. And then finally, the CDBG program also allows loans or grants to these qualified entities. And so what we're proposing this evening is that we expand our technical assistance program to include supportive services and financial assistance, but only in the form of grants. The state allows us to do loans of up to $50,000 and grants of up to $10,000. Unfortunately, they give us almost no money to do the loan servicing of the loans. And if you have a lot of very small loans, it's really, it's just kind of, it's infeasible at this point to operate. So a lot of state grantees through the CDBG program are doing away with their microenterprise loans because we just can't, in the post-redevelopment world, we can't afford it. We just can't do it right. We can't do it well. And these are loans that need a lot of hand-holding. These are very small business owners. Many of them are immigrant families with language barriers. They just need a lot of assistance to keep them from getting in over their head. And so we just don't feel like we have the way the CDBG program is structured, we can't do it well. But we are proposing to do grants of up to $5,000. And we're saying that they need to be matching grants, a 3-to-1 grant, so that the business owner does have at least some of their own personal funds involved. And This will be the first time we've done this, so this will be kind of exciting. So the questions before this commission are, do you have any comments on loans versus grants, or the size of the grants? Should we even do grants? There are some questions about granting of public funds to an individual. We don't underwrite them like a loan, but they do have to go through the whole technical assistance workshops, the one-on-one counseling, and develop a business plan. So they've already invested a considerable amount of personal time in addition to their cash contribution. So these are serious people. They're not fly-by-night. Then there's also a question of whether we should allow people to attend the class that are from Yolo County and outside of the city limits. So that's the second question that I would have the commission to weigh in on. So any comments or questions?
I have a question.
Absolutely.
So as far as the loans, have there been any discussion of a third-party vendor to service those?
I have discussed with other cities that have been doing these in the past and found the cost. It varies, but it's about $30 a month per loan. And we don't get we would have no money to operate with staff. It would eat up all of our, what they call the general admin in the grant. And then we get a 3-year grant, and all that general admin is done in 3 years, but we're not probably going to be doing 3-year loans. We're probably going to be doing 5-year loans or 7-year loans. So we have no money after that. Well, a little bit of program income, but limited amount of money to administer them afterwards. So it would be great if we could. I just don't, if the state makes some changes, maybe, but at this point, I don't see it being financially viable.
You don't think it's feasible to pass that through to the business to pay the servicing?
We're not allowed,
Not allowed,
under the
okay.
program. We do offer CDBG business loans when we have funds available, and the CDBG business loan program does loans similar to a bank, regular underwriting, collateralized loans. The only difference between us and a bank is that the business has to create jobs. Under the micro enterprise program, they don't have to create any new jobs, but under the regular business loan program, they have to create new jobs as a condition of the loan. And then our terms are more flexible than a bank. So we always end up being last on the collateral list. We're in second place, third place. I think we've been on fourth place a time or two. But what we do is on our CDBG business loan program is we are the last little bit that makes the loan work. We just do the gap financing usually.
Okay, thank you.
So there is some funding available.
I have a question. Did I hear you say that you would use a consultant to administer the program, or staff would administer the program?
We use consultants because we want to bring in people with that business consulting expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And with the language capabilities, so that we have English, Spanish, and Russian available. So in the past, our previous round of classes, we used a combination. The Small Business Development Center did our English language classes, and Opening Doors, which works with immigrant families in Sacramento and the region, did our Spanish language classes and our one-on-one counseling for Spanish and Russian language participants. The two of them got together and developed the criteria. So they all get the same curriculum. So they all get the same information, but in a language and culturally appropriated manner.
At Sac State, they have this Center for Small Business. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Can that center help these small businesses?
Absolutely. We're putting out the RFP because we have to do, because it's federal funds, we have to do a competitive selection every 3 years for our consultant. We can't just pick one and use them all the time. So actually we're putting out the RFP right now. So if you have a contact person you think I should contact to send that to,
Yeah,
just
yes.
let me know.
You know, they offer free service to help small business. I wonder if that center can help these businesses.
I'm sure they can. Mostly our micro-enterprise classes are people that are maybe not quite ready for that level, but that may be a really good second step. Because what we work in on the classes is, just basic terms. And a lot of these folks are not native English speakers, or they're immigrants, so they don't have a real good understanding of American business terms, banking terms, tax code, human resources operations, things that can really hurt a business if they get in trouble. So that we try and give them that basics, and then a lot of times we refer them out to other folks when we get to more specialized business issues.
Okay, so to summarize, staff is asking us to make a recommendation to adopt this micro enterprise technical assistance program and validate some of the issues you've raised. Let me take a shot at this and then see how we react, okay? So the first would be to limit the grants to 5,000, or have them be grants and limit to 5,000 with matching funds from the entrepreneur. Second would be to limit it to Yolo County residents. And third would be to have the loan duration 5 to 7 years. Is that hitting it, sort of?
Well, we're not proposing loans. So if you want to propose loans, that would, this is a recommendation to the city council. So if you want to recommend to the city council that we also do loans, then the commission can do that.
Okay, so, all right. So on the first item then, for whether they be loans or grants, any comments on that?
I definitely think that going the grant route makes a lot of sense, considering that there are so many different partners that service this area relative to smaller loans like Opening Doors, like you said, as well as the SBDC offering those services. So if the guidelines make sense, and with there being a match, that's a really big component. So I would definitely say it would make more sense to focus on grants as opposed to loans.
Okay, so a loan limit would be 5,000. Are you okay with that? I mean, a grant limit?
That makes sense for a starting point.
With matching funds.
You said 3-to-1, a 3-to-1 match, I believe, is what you said. Ms. Collins?
I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing. What's being proposed, what the staff recommendation is a maximum of 5,000 with a requirement of a 3-to-1 match. So if you want to just adopt them the way they are, that's what that means. If you want to adopt them if you want to recommend that the council adopt them with modifications, then you can choose to make that recommendation. Is that clear?
It's clear to me.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so so that's number one, staff recommendation, is that it be a grant, 5,000 with a 3-to-1 ratio, right? The 3-to-1 ratio clarification is
If you're satisfied with the staff recommendation,
Yeah.
then you just adopt the recommended action, which is adopt the guidelines as presented, or make a recommendation to the council to adopt the guidelines as presented.
Are you
okay.
looking for a motion?
That would be the motion.
That would be
If
the
you
motion.
feel that you want, you can make comments that we can present to the council, or you can make a different recommendation to the council.
Okay, so staff feels pretty good about the recommendation, right?
Well, staff wrote it, so yeah, we like it, but we absolutely are looking to your guidance for more information and for broader opinions.
I motion that we accept the guidelines as staff has written them.
Okay, is there a second?
I second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing no discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? So the staff recommendation to City Council stands as written. Thank you, Ms. Cullis. Okay, so next on the agenda is requests and comments from any of the commissioners. Hearing none, we can move on to staff updates.
All right, so first meeting's in the books. Thanks again for being here tonight. We wanted to just kind of ease into this and give you an orientation on some of the big picture items in economic development and housing. I do encourage you, if you have any questions or you want any more information on anything you see in the staff report tonight, reach out to me, reach out to Louise. We'd be happy to meet with you individually. We also distributed this schedule for the meetings for the rest of the year. It's available on the website. Just at this point, we just ask that you try to plan ahead, and we always like to have a quorum here. So sometimes it's been, in the past anyway, it's been sometimes a challenge. But we try to stick with the schedule. Fourth Wednesday of every month or every other month, and so that's for 2015, and we'll just continue that into the next year.
Okay.
So yeah, we don't have any other updates for tonight. Unless
Just as a reminder, if you are interested in serving on the First-Time Homebuyer Advisory
Loan Committee?
Loan Committee, contact me, contact Raul, and I can give you my card if you need it.
Okay.
Now, that has to be weekdays,
Yeah, we do them during business hours.
during business hours, weekdays?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. And so we have, thank you, Mr. Laurel. We have the calendar, the schedule for the meetings, and the calendar to those, if you would, please. And then we have adjournment. I have a motion for adjournment.
I motion.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.